You've heard it a million times, right? Just build a better product and the world will beat a path to your door. But what if better isn't actually better? Today, we're diving into a paradox that absolutely stumps countless businesses. Why do so many users stick with what they know, even when a clearly superior option is sitting right there in front of them? I mean, it's the classic business 101, isn't it? Build a better mousetrap. We're all kind of taught that in tech, in business, in life, the best product is supposed to come out on top. But let's be real. Is that what actually happens out there in the wild? Yeah, not even close. The data tells a totally different and, frankly, kind of shocking story. Studies show that a huge majority, we're talking between 60 and 80% of users, will actively resist switching, even when they admit the alternative is better. Just let that sink in for a second. That means up to 80% of your potential customers might be completely ignoring you, not because your product is bad, but because of these invisible walls. So the real challenge isn't just about building a better product. It's about understanding what those walls are made of and then figuring out how to tear them down. So let's get into it. All right, first up, let's talk about what I call the Great Migration myth. We've all seen this movie before, haven't we? Remember Google Plus? Technically, it had way better features than Facebook at the time, but it ended up being a digital ghost town. Or how about Windows Phone? A really solid, well-designed alternative to iOS and Android, yet its market share just flatlined. These giants learned a really tough lesson. Having a superior product is absolutely no guarantee of success. So, if a better spec sheet isn't the silver bullet, then what is? Well, this is where things get really interesting. We have to dive into the psychology of, well, the psychology of sticking. It turns out our brains are hardwired with all these irrational biases and mental shortcuts that are designed to keep us right where we are. These are the hidden forces we really need to understand. The first big barrier is something called switching costs. And no, we're not just talking about money here. This is the hassle factor. You know that feeling, right? It's the mental energy a user imagines they'll have to spend, transferring all their data, learning a new interface, worrying that something will break along the way. It's the giant looming headache of the change itself. And just how powerful is that headache? Get this. Studies in the banking world found that customers will tolerate fees that are up to 40% higher just to avoid the hassle of switching their account. Think about that. They are literally paying a huge premium for inertia. Next up is a real heavy hitter from behavioral economics: loss aversion. Put simply, the pain of losing something feels way more intense than the pleasure of gaining something of equal value. So when your user is thinking about switching, their brain isn't lighting up thinking about all the cool new features they'll get. Nope, it's screaming, wait, what am I about to lose? And the power of this bias is just staggering. The research is crystal clear. The psychological sting of a loss is 2 to 3 times stronger than the joy of an equivalent gain. That means your amazing new product can't just be a little better. It has to be perceived as 2 or even 3 times better just to break even against that primal fear of losing what they already have. And finally, there's the social glue that holds it all together: network effects. Simply put, some products are valuable for one main reason, because everybody else is already on them. Think social media, messaging apps, or the collaborative tools you use for work. This makes switching a social decision, not just a personal one. You know, if your entire team is on one project management tool, you can't just wake up one day and decide to use a new one, even if it's way better. You'd be cut off from the entire workflow. You're not just leaving a piece of software, you're leaving a community. Okay, so we've laid out the problem. We have these deep-seated psychological barriers that traditional surveys and focus groups just can't seem to see. So how in the world do we find out what's really going on? Well, this is where new technology is completely changing the game. AI is finally allowing us to get to the real why. Let's look at a concrete example of this in action: a platform called Atypica.ai. What they do is pretty wild. Instead of just asking people what they think they do, it actually creates these AI-powered simulations of different user types. Think of them as AI personas. And then it interviews thousands of them at scale to figure out what truly makes them tick on a much deeper level. And this isn't science fiction. These AI personas are actually validated against Stanford research and have been shown to have an 85% human-like behavioral accuracy. What that means is the insights you get are incredibly close to what you'd find in the real world. You just get them in a tiny fraction of the time. So the process is pretty systematic. First, it generates these super realistic AI personas from real user data. Then, it does something that's literally impossible for humans. It conducts thousands of expert-level interviews with them all at the same time. And finally, it analyzes all of that data through the lens of those behavioral frameworks we just talked about to get way past the surface-level answers and find the core psychological drivers. Now, when you're armed with these kinds of deep insights, your entire competitive strategy can just flip on its head. It stops being about this endless arms race to add more and more features. It becomes a game of empathy, a game of removing friction. This insight leads to a fundamental pivot. The old way of thinking, product teams just kept piling on features, trying to create a better product. The new, much smarter approach? The product team becomes obsessed with what makes switching hard, scary, or annoying, and then they build their entire strategy around fixing that. And this is definitely not a one-size-fits-all kind of deal. This research shows how these barriers change dramatically depending on who you're talking to. For example, with banking customers under 35, the biggest hurdle is social proof. They want to use what their friends and peers are using. But for users over 50, it's all about trusting the institution. You can immediately see how a single marketing message would totally fail to connect with both groups. So the big question, does this new strategy actually work in the real world? Okay, let's look at the results. Because moving from these insights to actual impact, well, it reveals some pretty staggering numbers.
Check this out. One fintech client discovered their users' biggest fear was the absolute nightmare of moving all their automatic payments over. So instead of marketing new features, they just built a simple tool that migrated everything in one click. The result? A 400% improvement in getting people to actually complete the onboarding process. Huge.
Here's another one. The research found that people are most likely to even consider switching banks during a major life event like moving or buying a house. So by focusing their marketing only on users during these key trigger events, another client saw their cost per acquisition drop by 60%. That's a massive efficiency gain. And maybe the most impressive number of all is the speed. Doing this kind of deep qualitative research the old-fashioned way can take 6 to 8 weeks. This AI-powered approach, it delivers deep insights of the same quality in about 20 minutes. That level of speed allows for an agility that was basically impossible before. It's a total game changer. So this leaves us with one final thought. We spend so much time and energy focused on what our competitors are building next. But maybe, just maybe, the real question we should be asking is this. What are the invisible threads of habit, fear, and social connection that are keeping your potential users right where they are? Because finding the answer to that, that's where you'll find your real breakthrough.